And so she's got to be pretty amazing, I thought to myself. And Jess, I actually I got interested in hiring a coach because I had never done a marathon. It was one of my like bucket list items. As I'm like a little bit older and a little bit creaky, and I was just coming off of having sprained both of my ankles and running the half. I was like, I want to make sure that I don't get injured. So Jess was highly recommended. She is uh, she is a certified running coach. She's a certified ultra running coach and 80/20 endurance certified and safe sport certified. And she's also the inaugural recipient of the Coaches of Color initiative, which is so cool. And she's just super positive and always understanding, even if I don't make my if I don't make my workouts or if I didn't like hit my goal or something like that. And she can somehow help me fit my running into my kind of really busy work schedule. So thank you so much to Jess, and I know that you'll really have a wonderful time during Jess's presentation today.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa. That was so nice. Yeah, I was actually just thinking, and we've been working together for like a few years now. Like it's been quite a while, which is always so cool as a coach to get to be a part of that journey. So thank you for inviting me and for working with me and all that. And yeah, we can just kind of go ahead and get started. I actually have a little presentation that I'm going to share screen with you guys too. So bear with me because I still want to see you guys too. Can you see the presentation okay?
Yes.
See everything? Hear me? Okay, awesome. And I can still see you guys mostly too. So that's good. Um, yeah, so Melissa already gave a really great introduction about me, which I love because I don't really like talking about myself. So that was amazing. But for our presentation today, I kind of wanted to give a little bit of a broader presentation. I've had, like the privilege of working with so many runners at this point, probably at least in the hundreds of runners. And I feel like oftentimes all of our issues or questions tend to boil down to a very similar amount of topics amongst most people. So I kind of narrowed down this presentation of like, what are the conversations that I tend to have the most with athletes? So that's kind of my goal for today is to get to chat through that and should have plenty of time for lots of questions at the end. Also, if you have questions during too, I'm actually totally fine to keep this conversational because I will kind of hop from topic to topic. So feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, if you want to save them at the end too, we can always revisit some of those topics that I talk about in here. Like I said, I don't really like talking about myself. I did have an about me section, but I don't really think I need to go over this anymore because Melissa already covered most of this. Which is awesome. So, my background is actually in biology and environmental science, interestingly enough. And actually, I used to work in research and interestingly worked in animal behavior before I started working with and human behavior, interestingly. So it's always kind of fun. That's actually one thing that I related to Melissa a lot on. I'm not nearly as advanced by any means, but I had a little bit of a insight into the animal behavior world, which is really cool. And I have a master's in secondary science education. So basically worked in the schools, teaching middle and high school kiddos about science, so biology, physics, all that sort of fun stuff. And then essentially kind of came into run coaching. I got little dabbles of it throughout college, but really, really took into it. And started my business in 2022 officially. I had been coaching previously prior to that, but I didn't start doing it full time until 2022. So we're up on 4 years now. Um, I've run pretty much most of my life. I was not very good at it from the start. Running is not something that comes to me like very easily, I would say. It does better now, but especially when I first started, I was definitely not the fastest. And running was quite hard. Running is quite hard. And then when I went off to college, I actually ran for the Iowa State Running Club. And I was the women's captain there for 2 years. So that's actually kind of where I got kind of dabbled in a little more of like a coaching position, led the women's team, led a daily workout, daily runs or daily workouts with them. And we did track, cross country, and then I worked with the half and full marathon team for the most part. And that's also when I ran my first 50K. I actually just didn't know how long a 50K was, but my friend asked me if I wanted to run it. And as a type A person, I was like, sure, we might as well do the longest distance option at this race. So that's kind of how that started. And I've run pretty much every ultra distance, 100 miles and below. I haven't gone above 100 miles yet because that's crazy. Um, and then, yeah, like I said, I started my business back in 2022. It's called Smiles and Miles Coaching. And I work with all runners of all backgrounds. So I work with people on the track. The shortest distance that I've coached recently is the 800 meters on the track. The longest distance has been 200 plus miles. So a big range of athletes, big range of goals, and all that sort of stuff. And then really the biggest goal is just helping athletes train sustainably and with joy. And I think a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, oh, you must like, your athletes must not take running very seriously because they're like very joyful and they want to find the joy in running. But actually, I would argue that the people who take the running most seriously are the ones who can find the joy in the process too. So hopefully, we'll touch on that a little bit in my presentation too. And I actually just brought on another coach to the team. Her name is Sophie. She mostly works with the trail and ultra runners, and she's also a new mom too. So it's always fun to have her perspective on the team as well. And then this also just, I felt like very important to share with this group in particular. These are my two dogs. The little one's Peanut. We don't know exactly what she is. We adopted her. We're guessing she's probably from Tijuana, but we don't really know her background. And Porter's the golden. We've had them both for Porter for almost 6 years now, Peanut for 5 years. And they're both very spunky and fun. And I was like, this is the perfect group to share my dogs with. Usually they're behind me on this bed for most of my presentations, but for like important presentations like this, sometimes I kick them out because they can be a little bit disruptive sometimes.
So if no one else is going to make the co-branch manager joke, I'm going to make the branch manager joke.
I love that. Yes. I would say Peanut is definitely the head, the leader of them both, the smaller one. Peanut or Porter's kind of our guy who just kind of lollygags around because he's such a golden retriever. He'll do anything that everybody else does. So I love that. Okay, so now I'm ready to get started. So yeah, coming back to kind of some big lessons that I see a lot in athletes, and things that we always kind of boil down to is this lesson behind consistency. And I'm sure you've probably heard this 1,000 times before, but I will tell it to you 1,000 times again because I think it's just that important. But really, the most important thing when it comes down to our running or even just our athletic career, our longevity as runners, is just this notion behind consistency. And I think running is um, very interesting because oftentimes, at least on my social media and Instagram, I always see these like really, really elaborate, fancy workouts that happen or like these crazy mountain runs. And they're amazing and they're like so awe-inspiring. But at the same time, it's like, oh, like how many days of recovery did that person need to take after that particular workout? And yes, some recovery time is always needed, and workouts are important. But really, the goal behind any athletic journey is just to be able to be as consistent as possible. So really, I tend to remind athletes that we're favoring this process of consistency rather than doing like one really, really amazing workout one week and then having to take days or even weeks off afterwards. So really kind of harnessing this goal of consistency. And in practice, what that often looks like um, is kind of gravitating towards this idea of frequency of running over again like one really really big workout in your week and then never running again until the next week. So I like to when I first start working with an athlete or if an athlete asks me like how many days a week should I be running, how many miles a week should I be running, how many workouts should I be doing, oftentimes the answer is that we want to just get running into your routine as frequently as possible. So for some athletes, that looks like 3 days a week. Some athletes, that's 4 or 5 days a week. Some athletes, that might even be 6 days a week. There's always an upper limit for everybody, and that answer looks different for every single person. But I would much rather have an athlete run, say, 4 days a week rather than 1 or 2 days a week, even if the mileage is exactly the same. So if an athlete ran 2 days a week and they ran 5 miles each day, or if they're running 4 days a week and we'll say only 2.5 miles each day. I'd actually rather pick the shorter mileage but more frequent runs rather than higher mileage with runs less frequently. And I think there's a lot of reasons behind that. I think it's just if you're running kind of more within your realm of if you're not trying to push super hard every single day, it is just a little bit more enjoyable. I'd rather go on some shorter runs rather than push myself to go 10 miles on a random day and then not run again for another couple of days. We want it to kind of be built into your routine. And then also, your body responds really well to this frequency and repetitiveness. The example that I always like to give is if you've ever had to go to physical therapy before, hopefully you haven't because that means maybe you've worked with an injury. But if you have had to work with a physical therapist before, they'll always probably recommend to do your exercises at least like 3, 4, maybe even 5 times a week. No physical therapist will ever tell you do your exercises 1 day a week and then don't think about them again until the next week. And that's just because your body's going to adapt to that better and quicker if you can do it more repetitively. So any great physical therapist or running coach, it all kind of falls under the same umbrella of just what your body can adapt to. We want you to be able to do it repetitively more times rather than less. So what that often looks like is actually maybe giving an athlete or someone working with a physical therapist actually easier, more repetitive workouts. So they might be shorter. There actually might be less types of exercises in it if you're in the physical therapy setting. Um, but the athlete's able to do them many more times as opposed to like if a physical therapist gave you like 20 exercises and they each take you 10 minutes each, and now this like workout routine is taking you hours. That's probably not going to be very repetitive for you. And the same idea goes with running. So kind of my little photos down here as an example is if we were kind of looking at the month of March, again, within reason, more is not always better, but we kind of want to be able to check off more and more days of the week when possible of running. And again, rest days are still important, and we'll actually touch on that in a few slides here too. Um, but the more that you can kind of build running into your calendar, the better. Because fitness builds over very, very long time scales. It's not over just one day. Fitness takes many, many weeks, months, or even years to run. And the more of those weeks, months, and years that you can stack, the better. Um, and then same thing with this weekly plan. So if an athlete, say for this example, is running 4 times a week, we might spread that out over the week. The little check marks signify a run. And we'd rather see that more frequently throughout the week rather than as opposed to like once or twice a week only. Next is easy running is so, so important. And this is where it's so fun because easy running is where you get to have conversations with your friends, where you get to have adventures. So easy running is kind of an umbrella term for just kind of the way that you're feeling out there. And the way that I like to kind of simplify it the most for runners is we have easy running, we have moderate running, and we have hard running. And the way my brain works, I think I'm a very visual person, is I think of almost like a gas gauge, or I guess a speedometer maybe is a better example, where in the green, you're running nice and easy, and I'll explain what that means in a second. If you're kind of more moderately on the speedometer, you're right in the middle. Maybe that's our yellow. And hard on the speedometer is all the way to the end of the scale where you're in the red, and your body's working very, very hard. So easy running is again that kind of green section. And that's where, again, like you could have a conversation with a friend, or where maybe your heart rate is a little bit low. And we'll talk about what that means and looks like in a second. Or maybe you could sing a song while you're running, which sounds very silly, but I've definitely done that before. That's a good way to gauge if you're running easy or not. Um, and it's just kind of this encompassing term. We can get a little bit more elaborate on that if you want, and if you have questions on that later, but just kind of this like nice fluid running that feels pretty simple. There's not much to it. Where things get a little bit more elaborate is like that moderate and hard running that I was discussing. And that's where things get a little bit harder. So you might have some structured speed workouts, and those are very, very important too. And to have a well-rounded training plan, speed workouts are very important as well. But easy running is really the base of everything. And that's just because easy running really builds your engine. A lot of coaches like to use this concept of like an aerobic engine. Um, I like that because that's I feel like that's just a great analogy for running because we're thinking of how we're powering our body. So if we think about our engine, we want a really, really strong, sturdy engine. And the way that we're built that is through many, many, many weeks, months, and years of easy running. And the other things are important too, but in order to build that engine and make it stronger and stronger, that's happening through easy running. And there's a lot of science behind that. Easy running helps you build more mitochondria for energy production. It helps you build more capillaries that help your body be more efficient at transporting oxygen in your body. Lots of very um, elaborate concepts that we don't necessarily need to get into, but easy running is where that is all built. And another thing about easy running too is um, the recovery context of it. If you're running truly easy, it shouldn't need super long recovery times needed for it, and it actually can help you recover from your other harder efforts. It can help prevent you injury, help prevent burnout. Running hard every single day is not particularly fun, in my opinion. It's fun to be able to run with friends and to have conversations or listen to music or a podcast. And I think that also prevents burnout in athletes as well. So I have a little photo down here of a brick wall because I always like to use this analogy with athletes too, is to think of running as just like this very repetitive activity because it is. And that you're essentially every run that you build, every run that you do is adding a brick to this brick wall. I don't know why we're building a brick wall. Who knows? It's just a silly thing. Running is a silly thing that we do. Um, but you really want this really, really big and strong and very large brick wall. We're all just trying to build this really silly, large brick wall for some reason because we like running. So every run that you do adds a brick to the wall. Some runs add really, really big bricks, like tons of bricks to the wall. So that might be like a speed workout or even a race can build some bricks into your wall. A long run probably adds a lot of bricks. But easy running is just where we're kind of constantly stacking bricks every single day. Those really, really great workouts that we're doing, the long runs, the speed workouts, and all that, they build a lot on the wall very quickly, but we can't do that super often. Whereas easy runs, you can stack those essentially almost every single day if you're running them truly easy, and you're just going to add more and more bricks. And the goal is hopefully to someday have 5, 10, 15, 20 years of bricks in the wall that you've just been contributing to for a long time. And hopefully you can look back on your running career with a lot of pride, just building this silly brick wall. And I always like that analogy of just like sometimes when I don't want to get out the door for an easy run because sometimes it feels tiring, motivation can be low, life stress, all that sort of stuff. I think back to that brick wall of just like, I just want to add one more brick. And even if it's just a short 10-minute run, that's okay. It's still adding a brick to the wall. And then on that note, we'll also talk about recovery because that's, I would say, equally as important as the training oftentimes. So I just really, really like the growth equation is often what it's called of stress plus rest equal growth. So you can add stress to your life. We're all probably very, very good at adding stress to our lives. Training is a type of stress. Work is a type of stress. Relationships, school, whatever it might be, all add stress to our system. In this context, we're obviously talking more specifically about training, but we are all humans and we take this from a holistic approach. So that's why I like kind of taking like training plus recovery equals adaptation, but more so for us as holistic humans, stress plus rest equal growth. So obviously a very important part of that equation is yes, the training, we have to add stress to the system. But we also have to add rest to the system in order to truly get that growth. If we're constantly adding more and more and more stress to the system and we never rest, growth isn't going to happen that way. You're just going to not like running and be tired all the time and be burnt out, which we don't want. Um, and recovery is actually in the context of a lot of things. Rest days, obviously, days off of running and training, very, very important. And that's usually the way that we think of recovery. And that is a very important part of it. But other things that contribute to our recovery are like sleep. Sleep is a very, very important. I won't tell you numbers on sleep because you all probably get told that enough. But just getting enough sleep in the context of your life and your training. And I think that looks a little bit different for everybody. But if you have a stint of life where you're getting less sleep, then that's something to consider. And you might start looking at recovery in other contexts too, of maybe sleep is something that we can't control, but maybe we can, have more recovery weeks in training. Maybe we can adjust our life stress a little bit. Usually that's not within our control. We can really, really make sure we're doing well on our fueling, all of that sort of stuff, when that sleep recovery context isn't there. Um, Another one that's very, very important, and I think the one that often gets missed the most, which we'll actually talk about a little bit more again here, is fueling. So by fueling, I just mean eating. So eating all sorts of good food, protein, carbs, fats, they're all very, very important for everybody, but especially for runners. And that counts for both in and out of training too. So we'll talk a little bit in the next slide about what fueling in training might look like for an athlete who's running very, very long distances like you all are, but also outside of training too. So making sure that an athlete is well fueled. Oftentimes, a lot of issues with recovery or sometimes even burnout in training motivation can often be tied to, well, is this athlete eating enough carbs or are they eating enough protein? Those can often set the stage for injuries to happen, just being low on energy, not feeling well, and runners have to eat a lot. So that's always a very, very important one. Down in recovery weeks. So this might be a week where you're, cutting back on mileage a little bit to recover. Maybe you're just running easy. Recovery weeks can look different in a lot of different ways. There are a lot of ways to approach recovery weeks. But that's part of the rest part of the equation too, is just building those in. What that looks like in practice is actually a little bit different for every athlete. It kind of depends on how long they've been running, what they respond well to versus what they don't respond well to. So by that, I mean some athletes actually can keep their mileage up in a recovery week, but just run totally easy. Some athletes need to really, really cut back on mileage. It all kind of depends on the context of how long they've been running, how adapted to it they are, how long they've been doing speed workouts, and how much mileage they do, all that sort of stuff. So down and recovery weeks often vary by athlete on what those actually look like in practice. And of course, one of my favorites is life stress, because this is one that we like to kind of try to forget a lot. But stress is stress is stress. It comes from training, it comes from life, it comes from home, it comes from my dog sometimes has to go to the vet at 2 a.m. and that's very stressful, like whatever it might be. Those all contribute to, and that's something that we often have to account for and modify training for a little bit too. So if you're feeling really stressed in life, whether that's a big presentation coming up or again, like something kind of unplanned happened, that can contribute. And oftentimes we might need to adjust training a little bit, maybe build in a recovery week for that. Just because, again, our bodies don't know, they don't understand mileage or why we're running or any of that sort of stuff. It only knows us in the context of stress. And again, stress is stress. It comes from training, it comes from life, it comes from all the things. So these are all things that we want to make sure we account for in our running too. Next one is my favorite, fueling. So I talked about this a little bit in the last slide, but this is where we'll talk about it a little bit more. So fueling supports both performance and recovery. So we'll talk about it in those kind of two different avenues of fueling performance and also fueling our recovery as well. Um, Fueling, again, like I said on the last slide, comes into a play for an endurance athlete in a few different ways. One, obviously, being just eating in life. So eating enough food in life. And we all have very, very different requirements that we need. We all have very, very different bodies. So I won't give any specific numbers for anybody, but a kind of general rule of thumb that I like athletes to follow is that we should always be eating 3 meals a day. That's kind of a given. And then hopefully also eating 1 to 3 snacks a day. And what that might look like in practice just varies based on how deep you are in training. So if you are not training for a race, you're just kind of running for fun, getting some nice exercise in, not running super long, not running super intense, you might just need your 3 meals and maybe a snack a day. If you're like really, really deep in, we'll say like marathon training, we, are really in the intense part of training, you're doing all these long runs and workouts, definitely want to veer more on the side of like hopefully some bigger meals, 3 meals a day, sometimes even 4 or 5 when I'm eating because I just love food. And then also incorporating maybe like up to even 3 snacks a day. I think that's kind of a nice rule of thumb. Again, that in practice, that's going to look different for everybody a little bit, but just making sure you're really eating plenty of food, in all times, but especially um, in your training too. And then I think something else that I always like to remind athletes is fueling actually is kind of hard. It's hard to eat enough because we're busy. And especially when you're deep in training, there's already so many things to worry about of like hitting your run for the day, doing your long run. So I often like to think of like, fueling is something that we need to be very intentional about. And by that I don't mean like making sure you eat all of your vegetables or something. Like it's actually truly just eating enough food. And I think in order to do that, you really, really, really have to make sure you're planning in advance, packing your snacks for the day if you're going to work. It's something that you have to be very intentional about. And if you're not, then that might be a sign that we're not fueling enough either. So that's a little bit outside of training. Inside of training, so this is often where like the long run comes in. So if you eat gels on the run, eat candy, fun snacks, and that sort of thing. This is something that is very, very important, and we'll kind of talk about what that looks like in practice. Um, but I also like to remind athletes too that your long run fueling is essentially your practice for your race day fueling. So when you run a marathon, you should have plenty of practice and have kind of planned out exactly what your fueling plan is going to be. And there's always going to be a little bit of changes with like weather might affect your fueling plan. For women, sometimes the menstrual cycle sometimes can even affect the fueling plan a little bit. Heat versus cold, I guess that falls under weather. Rain, climate, all that sort of stuff can definitely play a role in your fueling plan. But this is all stuff that hopefully we should have practiced tons in training. A sports dietitian that I like to bring on the team, we actually just had her recently on to chat. She always says to start planning it at least 3 months in advance, which I think is a nice kind of a good kind of well-rounded number. But honestly, if you're training year round anyways, you might as well practice your fueling plan regardless of how far you are from a race. But 3 months is kind of a nice timeline to give you plenty of time to like trial and error some things, practice your fueling, practice your hydration, all that sort of stuff too. So the way that I like to think of fueling is actually in kind of two different subsets. So first one being our carbohydrate intake, and we're really most interested in carbs. Proteins and fats can play a little bit of a role during running, but that's often for very, very long, like ultras. And even that sometimes is some athletes will fall in that bucket and some won't. Really, what we're most interested in is our carbohydrate intake, and then also hydration. But I'll talk about carb intake first. So when it comes to carb intake, again, that's kind of what we're most interested in. So carbs can be gels. That's usually the most common one because gels are very easy. They're already prepackaged for you. They're made specifically for running or endurance sports. But it can also look like bringing candy on your run. Or I have an athlete who started bringing Twinkies on her run, which she's been really, really enjoying. So you can get pretty creative with it. Some athletes will bring like chips or crackers or pasta. Also, sports drink have carbs in them. So there's a lot of different ways to get carbs, and it can be pretty fun. But as for when to take them and what type of run to take them on, kind of my rule of thumb is just on most runs over 60 to 75 minutes in length. 75 minutes is kind of a nice number of like if I'm running over 75 minutes, I should probably bring some fuel with me. If I'm running under 60 or 75, that might be a scenario where you don't necessarily need to bring it. So for that might look like definitely long runs. I would assume at some point they're definitely going to get longer than 75 minutes. So you'll want to bring them then. Or if you're doing like maybe a longer workout or anything like that. The caveat to this is if you come into a run not well fueled, that actually is a scenario to fuel on a run shorter than 60 minutes. So by that I mean if you like had breakfast a while ago at like 6 a.m. and you're finally getting out on your run at like 11 a.m. So it's been many hours since you've had your last meal. That would be a scenario where we would probably want to bring some carbs on the run just because you're probably already burned through your carb stores in your body, just because you've been working and you ate many, many hours ago. A way to combat that would be to have a little carb snack before you go out on a run. So I always like to just eat fruit snacks or like animal crackers right before I head out. If your stomach's adapted to it, you can even do that like right before you head out the door. A good rule of thumb though is like 20 to 30 minutes for most athletes because most people's stomachs don't necessarily agree with that. So thinking like 20 to 30 minutes before, whether it's like having some candy or just something nice and carby beforehand, a banana, toast, a little snack before you head out, and that will give you kind of what you need for the rest of the run. But if you don't have the opportunity for that, that might be a scenario where you might bring some carbs on the run, even if it's shorter in length. Um, as for the amount of carbs to bring, this is going to vary a lot by athlete too, but kind of as a very general rule of thumb, for most athletes will fall in under this 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour of running. So for reference, most gels, so like a GU gel is 20 grams of carbs. So that's a lot. You're taking at least maybe three plus GUs per hour on the running. So it's a lot of carbs. Most athletes are covered pretty well in the 60 to 75 grams of carbs range. But we're kind of seeing more and more that athletes are doing better and better, going even higher on the carbs. There's caveats to that because that can cause GI issues sometimes. So this is something that we really want to train your body to do. So again, that's why we practice this at least 3 months in advance. But again, most athletes tend to do pretty well in the 60 to 75 gram range. But if you're not there yet, don't start at 60 because your stomach will probably be pretty mad at you. So start if you're maybe checking on what you're doing now, if you're eating like 40 grams of carbs per hour, maybe bump it up to 45 and see how that feels. Bump it up to 50, see how that feels, and kind of play around with it a little bit, and just work your way up. Just like we train your legs to run longer distances or run faster, we also have to train your gut to do the same thing. And unfortunately, our gut has a shorter memory than our legs do. So if you haven't done it recently, it's something that you might actually have to repractice again and retrain your gut to withstand digesting carbs while you're running. So don't let this number feel overwhelming yet. I really want you to like make sure you start, lower, then work your way up. And again, this is for runs typically longer than 75 minutes in length. So if you're running like an hour and a half, that would be a scenario to put it into. As for like when to fuel on the run, I get that question a lot as well. I like to wait until 30 minutes into the run, and that's just because, again, if you're already well fueled, and that's a big caveat, is assuming you're already well fueled going into the run, you already have enough carbs on board to sustain you for a little while. But we want to make sure that we're fueling before you get hungry or before you kind of burn through all of your carb stores. So 30 to 40 minutes is usually kind of a nice timeline for most athletes of just starting that fuel. Because again, we want to make sure we do this before you get hungry or before you burn through all of your carbs. Because by then we're already probably doing this a little bit too late. And obviously, it's never too late to catch up, but we might as well start and keep you ahead of this sort of thing. So starting about 30 to 40 minutes in, and then just consistently fueling about, again, most athletes are pretty well around 60 to 75 grams of carbs per hour from there. And then just remember that's an average too. So that doesn't mean you need to take 60 grams of carbs all at once. You can space it out over the course of the hour. So a lot of athletes really, really like to do like every 15 or 20 minutes, I start fueling or I take a little sip of a gel and just hopefully finish that amount by the end of the hour. And then also a reminder too that like your carb drinks play into this too. So if you take like Gatorade or Tailwind out while you run, that also contributes to your carb intake. So that can actually kind of help a lot with the number that we need to meet. It's not always just from gels either. So that's on carbs. Next is hydration, which unfortunately I can't probably give you specifics quite as much because hydration is very crazy. We all have very, very different sweat rates, and we all sweat different amounts, and we all sweat different amounts of sodium out too. So there's actually like not really like with carbs, I can kind of give a very general range for most athletes, but with hydration, we actually all vary so much on the scale of like thousands of milligrams of sodium difference between athletes. It's pretty insane. So the way that we can kind of test this out is doing a sweat test. You can even just do that at home, like weighing yourself naked before and after a run, and seeing how much water you've lost. And there's also like the patch sweat test too that you can do to figure out your sodium needs. So that one's a little bit more complicated, but with hydration and electrolytes, these are both kind of something that we need to pair together. So plain water is okay within reason, but we probably also need to pair that with some sodium intake too. So sodium is also what we're kind of most interested in. So what that looks like in practice might be like, again, a sports drink can cover us with that. Electrolyte tablets that you pop in your hydration flask or your bottle before you head out is another really good way. Some athletes like salt tabs. There's a lot of different ways to get enough sodium in when you're running, but hydration is one that I think often gets a little bit underappreciated. That's very, very important because especially if you're a salty sweater like me, if I don't um, hydrate enough, then I'm usually not feeling very well on the run, and it really, really hinders performance. It's something like a 2% dehydration can reduce your performance by like 11% or something crazy like that. So like even just a small amount of dehydration can play a huge role in your performance as well. Um, then recovery nutrition is another one that I wanted to touch on too. Is just um, you don't need to be like super strict on your timing necessarily with fueling, but I really don't want you finishing a run and then like not thinking about food for many, many hours and like getting to work or just like typing away in the computer or doing something like that. Um, Recovery nutrition usually looks like for most athletes within like 30 to 60 minutes. And again, we don't need to be super specific about that because, that's no fun when you start to put numbers to things. But 30 to 60 minutes post run, getting in just carbs and protein. Fats are also important too, of course, but really, really want to make sure that we're reloading up on carbs again after the run and then just getting enough protein for repair too. Um, so in practice, that often looks like sometimes just having like a little protein shake and a banana post run. This also will depend on your meals too, though, of course. So if you are finishing your run and you have 3 hours till lunch, that's definitely a scenario where we'll want to eat right away after your run. Just get a little snack in. But if you finish your run and you're like, I'm about to eat lunch in 45 minutes, then that's when you can be a little bit more flexible because you're about to get a meal in anyways. So again, that's one that you can be a little bit flexible on. But that's one that will really, really help a lot with recovery too, if you can get that kind of reestablished right away post run as well. And then lastly, progress isn't linear. This is one that's sometimes very frustrating for me myself too as an athlete. I know better, but sometimes it feels frustrating when you're not seeing progress in the way that you want to. So always a reminder that ups and downs in your training and your fitness are very normal. Unfortunately, fitness can't always increase constantly and just only go up. I will say something that I think a lot of runners notice when they first get into running. I'm actually noticing this right now because I started to get into biking recently. Biking is really, really fun for me right now because I'm basically only getting better at it because I was very, very bad at it before. It's very easy to get better at something when you're a beginner. And we see this in running all the time too. When I work with more of a beginner runner, it's so fun because they run a PR week after week after week, it seems like, and it happens constantly because your body's just adapting well, and that's really cool. But there is always a stop to that. Our body can't just constantly improve all the time. And there will be a point where we're going to see either like a plateau or stagnation in our progress. That's all very normal. So my caveat to this is oftentimes beginner runners often see that progress can be linear for a while, but it isn't always. I like to remind myself of that in biking, but also with beginner runners too. Um, so just some reminders is that training adaptations actually take a lot of time. Again, like you can see some pretty initial benefits pretty quickly, especially when you add in like a new type of workout or a new training stimulus. That's always really fun. But with time, um, those things will plateau too. So really training, we think of them often in the scale of weeks because our race is 12 weeks away or whatever it might be. But we're also hopefully thinking of training in the context of months and years. So I've been running for like over 15 years now. And I like that's something that I'm very proud of considering I'm 28. So I have not been on the planet for that long, and I've still been running for, half over half my life now. And that's something that should be hopefully any athlete's goal is to be able to do it with longevity. Um, because again, we're just kind of stacking bricks over and over and over, and you'll see progress with time. But with that, you will see kind of ups and downs with that. So that's this little graph here. The trend is up, but you see there's some big divots in that graph too, and that's often what fitness looks like as well. Your trend is up, but you're going to have a recovery cycle. You're going to have time where you're just stepping away from training for a little bit, and maybe you're still running consistently, but it's a little bit of a less focused training block. You're going to have sickness that's going to contribute. An athlete going through an injury or pregnancy is another great example where we might start to see a little bit of a regression. That's totally normal and happens in life. But if you can keep doing it consistently, keep doing it healthily, the trend will be up with time. It's just you really have to zoom out to see that. And so that's just a good reminder of just like these things take a lot of time and that there are going to be regression cycles, and that's totally normal. Um, Same with, I kind of touched on this, but like life stress will contribute to this too. We just have seasons of life, is the way that I like to think of it and describe it, is some seasons of life we can contribute a lot more to training, and that's always fun. And some seasons of life we have less time where maybe we're really, really busy with a work specific thing, or again, like an injury or an athlete, going through pregnancy or anything like that. Those are all seasons of life that will contribute, but we just want to make sure we remember to zoom out. So I actually always really like this analogy. I heard a coach, actually one of my mentors, she's an amazing coach, use this analogy of like a tornado. Is that if you look at like a little tornado graphic, and if you start at the bottom and you work your way up, there's going to be little periods where you're moving up along the tornado, and there's also periods where you can see like the trend looks down, but you're going to eventually loop around and come back up, because eventually your training is going to be up at the top, and it's all connected in its own way. And there's going to be some periods where you're going down, and it looks like you're going down the length of the tornado or the hurricane, but actually, like it's all connected, and you're coming on the way up. So just another reminder, kind of another visualization of it's not always upwards. If you zoom out, you can kind of see the full length of the hurricane or the tornado, and that you're actually working your way fully up it, and instead of just going down on one little cycle too. And that's all I got. But some big picture things, just kind of things that we always kind of boil back down to is consistency is key. That's kind of our most important kind of thing that we're kind of remembering is how can I get training in more consistently or more frequently into my life in a way that isn't overdoing it and isn't going to burn me out, but feels right. So again, that looks a little bit different for every person. Easy running is always the most important thing to kind of fall back onto. So workouts are very, very important, and that's something that is still workouts and long runs are very, very important. And those are a part of a very well-rounded training plan, but the base is still always back down to easy running. So if you're ever in doubt, just go out on an easy run. If your foot hurts a little bit, but it's not injured, if you have a speed workout for the day, don't do that speed workout, just go run easy. Totally okay. If you feel like maybe a little sniffly and you're worried about getting sick, easy run, or a rest day maybe. But the default is always just having a nice easy run. Things always boil back down to recovery. Stress plus rest equal growth. You need to have that recovery context there. Fueling enough is one of the most important things. If you're not fueling enough, you're not going to have enough fuel or gas in your car to do the things that you want. And then also, hopefully, a recurring theme that we see here is just patience. Running is a very, very patient practice, and that's one of the things that I think makes it so fun, is that the work that you put in now, you'll see many, many years down the line, but you do have to be patient in the process to see that. And then just kind of runners that I often see that have the most long-term growth. Long-term growth, and I guess running careers are not the ones who are pushing every single day. I always think back to myself when I was like in high school and college, and every run was pushed very, very hard. It was just for some reason my nature. I thought it was just great to go out and run hard every single day. But that's not the goal. That I was very burnt out at one point because of that. I probably wasn't feeling my best, probably wasn't performing my best because I was pushing so hard every single day. But the ones who can train consistently and take care of their bodies are the ones who have that long-term growth and success too. So yeah, that's what I got. I'm excited for questions. I hope you have lots of questions.
So I'm just going to jump in since I saw a question
Yeah.
in the chat from
Oh,
Anthony
yeah, cool.
about strength training. Is it
Oh,
important
yeah.
to include strength training?
Yes, strength training is so important. Sorry, I just want to close out so I can see you all better again. Yes, strength training is very, very important for runners. I would say it's important for everybody, but especially very important for women and women who are aging. I mean, we're all aging, but as we age through life, strength training becomes even more and more important. So what that looks like in practice most of the time, the sweet spot for most athletes is strength training 2 times a week. One time a week is great. If you that's all you can get, amazing. We're not going to be upset about that by any means. But if you want to get your full adaptations and training in your week, then 2 times a week is kind of the amount of stimulus that we need at a minimum to get all of the benefits that we want. 3 times a week is great. To be honest, for most people, that's often a bit much. But strength training has a lot of great benefits. Injury prevention is often the biggest one that we see. So just being a more resilient runner. But it also helps with just your power. Running, we often don't think of ourselves as endurance athletes as power athletes, but we are. Every step that you take is power propelling yourself forward. And strength training can really help with that as well. So yes, strength training is huge. It's important, and it's very, very important for just your bone development and your resilience as an athlete too.
I
Fiona,
see
do you
that.
want to say your question?
Yes, sorry, I didn't know if you were reading everything out, Helena. Just on the topic of strength training, would you recommend focusing equally on upper and lower body, or if you're training specifically for running, should you skew the strength training more towards your legs?
I love this question. I would actually say both, which maybe not everybody would think that would be my answer. But I would say both because we want you to be a well-rounded human and we want you to be strong in a lot of different ways too. I actually think a lot of runners are already very, very strong on their legs, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for that. But sometimes we lack in our upper body and even maybe our core. But we still use our core and our upper body for running. Actually, we use our core a lot in running, and we use our upper body too. Like I would say when I look back at some of my races, the most tired I've ever been is because my shoulders have been so sore because I've just been running so much. So actually, like I would say everything is pretty important. So we actually have a strength coach that works with our team, and she programs full body workouts. So it's obviously mostly legs because that's kind of often what we need to work the most on. Like we might have weak hamstrings, so you might need to work on your hamstrings and that sort of thing. But there's always kind of some upper body incorporated in some way, whether that's like something as simple as like doing bicep curls or like a press or something like that. But I'd say like it's all important. But if you have like something that is bothering you, so again, like calves tend to be kind of a common one. Hamstrings, quad strength can sometimes be a problem. And if you have a problem area in your legs, definitely focus on those. But I would say like the whole body is very, very important to be a well-rounded runner too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Tracy
I just
Swiss
wanted
is
to point
muted.
out that
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
wanted to point out that Flick had a question like really early, and I didn't want her to get passed up.
Sorry, I didn't see.
Okay,
Yep.
that's okay. That's okay. Um, so hi, thank you for your presentation. I like that you scattered little bits of like baby runner stuff in there along with the endurance. And I'm very much a baby runner who's very distractible. And for example, I'm about to go do a handstand class,
I love that.
which will
That's
be
awesome.
fun. But I have a really hard time staying like being with consistency and motivation and
Sure.
building to a point that I can just keep going and not getting injured as part of that. My ankles are made of cheese.
Sure.
So I was wanting to get some of the weirdest ways you have encountered of people motivating themselves to run. And I'll
Yeah.
I'll start with my little tip that I use is I have an app called, it used to be called Zombies Run. It's now called ZRX, and it's a audio story about running away from zombies, and it encourages you to like run. They're right behind you while you're running. It just like interrupts your music and tells you to keep going. But yeah, I
I
just want some like kooky things, please.
I love that so much. First off, I need to look at that app and probably should recommend it to some of my athletes too. So thank you for that. That's so cool. Yeah, I think running is funny because oftentimes we like, oh, I just have to go out on this like whatever mile run, or I have to go run for 30 minutes or whatever. So I have to go run 15 minutes out and 15 minutes back, and that's all that I do. But I actually think like incorporating like something into that is way better than just like I just need to go be bored for 30 minutes. So whether that's like incorporating, like I love podcasts and audiobooks and music when I run. I actually rarely run without it. The only times I do don't run with any of that is like in a race. Um, and that's just because like it's kind of boring if you're by yourself to just like go run, and you might as well have some fun with that. So I like to incorporate games sometimes too, especially if I have an athlete who's like really, really struggling with like getting out there. Something as simple as like take 3 pictures of something really cool that you saw and then like send them to me, or like upload them to your Strava if you have a Strava account or something like that. Just like random goofy pictures of things that you see. I also like to play like the color game sometimes too. So like pick a color before you head out on the run. So we'll say like purple and find all the purple things that you can while you're running. It sounds very silly, but it does bring you out of like, oh, I need to go look at, like at what's around me instead of just like thinking about running and looking at my feet. So incorporating games. I think also incorporating it in different ways too, of just like not running for the sole purpose of running. So sometimes I like to have an athlete just run for 10 minutes before they go to their strength workout or their handstand class or whatever it might be. I'm just doing like a little 10-minute run, and essentially just keeping it as like your warm up. Like I'm running to warm up for this strength class or something like that. You can get really creative with these things. But yeah, I think always like if you can gamify it in some way is always kind of a fun way to do it too. And I'll definitely have to check out that app as well.
You made me think as well of, I haven't seen her pop up in my feed for ages, but a woman on TikTok who has a little crowd counter, and she counts the dogs that she sees when she's out for
Oh,
runs.
yes. Yes, I have an athlete who has a dog counter in her training log. So she say like, I saw 5 dogs today and I pet one of them. So yeah, there's always like fun ways that you can incorporate. You just have to like kind of get creative with it. But that's kind of the point. Like running isn't meant to be like this very metric and numbers focused thing all the time. There's a time and place for that sometimes, but it's actually like meant to be this silly, goofy thing that we get to do because, why else do we do it?
Thanks
So
for the
we have
tips.
just a few more minutes, and I see 2 questions in writing, and then Alejandra, why don't we hear your question, and then maybe we can squeeze in those 2 other ones quickly.
Sure. Thank you for all the information. It was really useful. I would like to ask about heart rate. So when I
Mhm. Oh yeah.
run, I'm a very slow runner, and even on my basic runs, my slow runs, I get my heart rate really high, 180, above 180. Is there a recommendation to try to slow that down, to bring that
Yes.
down?
Super good question. And it's another one that heart
Brady.
rate is a little bit more nuanced than just I can give like a random number to you all because we all, again, have very, very different physiologies. We all have very different hearts and the way that our hearts interact with our bodies and our cardiovascular systems too. So if anybody ever gives you like an equation, probably don't use it to be quite honest. But yes, to answer your question, heart rate is something that we can definitely use to kind of calibrate our feel. And that's usually the way that I use
Brady.
it in the context of training too, is
Brady.
calibrating your heart rate or calibrating your feel using heart rate. But we use that in kind of a nuanced way that like athletes I tend to find like, oh, I don't need to be as worried about this as I thought I needed to be. But yes, to kind of go back and answer your question, heart rate is something that we do want to have controlled, but your specific heart rate and your easy heart rate is going to be very different than everybody else's. And that all is based on things like Genetics play a big role in how your heart rate works, your current fitness, your training, the heat, caffeine even plays a role in what your heart rate looks like. So it's pretty complicated. Um, but if you are finding like 180 is pretty high, I would say that's probably not for most people. You'd have to have a very, very high max heart rate in order to have a 180 be your easy heart rate. And what I usually tell athletes is like, just walk a little bit and let your heart rate come back down and then run a little bit again. And then kind of build in whether it doesn't need to be a structured walk run. But if you do feel like your heart rate is truly, really, really high, you can build in some walks. You can slow down a little bit if you can. But I actually think that walking can be really underrated in running. And that's something to utilize of just walking for whether that's like even just a 30 seconds or a minute at a time to let your heart rate come down and then re-go again. That can be a really, really nice way to keep a run truly easy, even if you're kind of struggling with heart rate too. But one problem that I tend to see with athletes who get really, really worried about heart rate is, well, I guess one problem. The first problem is often that the heart rate monitor isn't always correct. So make sure you have an accurate heart rate monitor. Those usually are either a chest strap, so it's like a strap that you literally wear across your chest, or an armband. Actually, the Coros armband is one that I've been really, really liking with athletes. It seems to be very accurate. Wrist-based tends to not be the most accurate. So honestly, if I have an athlete using wrist-based heart rate, I usually don't use it as data because it's usually not worth it. So make sure you have accurate heart rate first. And then don't worry about it too much, but just see kind of where you're falling typically. And then with time, you'll kind of see like, oh, on a really, really hot day, my heart rate is really high, but on a nice cool day, it's actually a little bit lower and looking nice and chill. So that might be the day that you want to emulate a little bit more in your training. And then with time, you can probably calibrate that too, and a coach can always help you with that as well. Um, Also, yes, I actually saw a message here that breathing helps to lower the heart rate too. So making sure that you're taking these deep breaths. I think a lot of times I'm going to do a weird breathing here, but I see athletes who are breathing very quickly, like in their running, but we kind of want to be able to slow that down and just take bigger, deep breaths. And in order to do that, that often means that you might have to slow down too. So that's the caveat of like, if you can breathe a little bit slower, if you can talk while you run, that's even better. That often is an indicator that your heart rate's going to be low enough that you can kind of interact with people in order to do that. Breathing more, slowing down, adding in those walk breaks are really, really important too. And then that often can help bring your heart rate down too. And then also actually hydration is a very underrated one. Being dehydrated can make your heart rate very, very high, I see. So just make sure you're drinking enough too.
Thank you. And I think
Yeah.
since it's already 7, maybe we'll just wrap it up with one last question from Lynn, which was, how do you determine the frequency of rest days?
Great question. I have a little bit of time. I know I don't want to take up anybody else's time,
Okay.
but I'm okay with answering a few more questions after the time too. Frequency of rest days is a great question. I'm going to say it depends on the athlete too, which is very annoying. Most of my answers are always it depends, but I will give some reasoning behind that. If an athlete's currently running like 3 days a week and they feel like, oh, it's actually really easy, it's feeling good, then that might be a scenario that I might bump them up to 4. And maybe they have 3 more rest days in the week. So kind of seeing where you are now and where you're feeling, and then bumping up from there if you need more days of the week to run, and just seeing how your body responds to that. If you're finding like I'm constantly always very, very sore, I'm very, very fatigued all the time, I'm just not feeling well and just not enjoying it, then that might be a scenario that your previous setup was a little bit better. But if you are feeling good, if feeling fine, stay it there for a few weeks just to make sure you don't have any like injury flares or anything like that. But that might be a scenario that you're actually in a good place to, for that new kind of level up there. I will say, everybody should at least have 1 full day of rest from training a week. So that's like rest from strength, running, biking, uh, classes, whatever it might be. We kind of want 1 full day to just totally come down and chill out. But a light movement on those days are good. So if you like are walking the dogs, I walk my dogs every single day. So that's something that like a movement that I get. I don't really consider my training. But everybody needs at least 1 rest day a week. And then from there, we just kind of determine by athlete, like where are they currently at and how are they feeling in training. If they aren't feeling challenged enough, then that might be a scenario that we take one rest day away. If they're already feeling good and challenged and like they're adapting well, we keep it where they are. Or if they're feeling too challenged, that might be a scenario that we might need an extra rest day. But with that, a good kind of reminder is always that if you do feel constantly always very, very tired, like you need rest days all the time, that actually might be a scenario where we need to evaluate if you're truly running easy. Because easy running shouldn't make you that tired. It will within reason if you're, kind of bumping up your volume and your consistency with time. But you should be able to adapt to that. So if you always feel like you need a rest day, that actually might be a scenario to evaluate your training too.
Mhm. Thank you. Anybody want to have one more question before we wrap up? Well, thank you so much. I'm actually going to put my teacher's hat on before we, I see one more question. Is there a question?
Yes,
Fiona,
From me, yes.
okay.
I just had a quick question. I'm not really a runner. I do a little bit of running sometimes when I get bullied
What?
into it by
Fiona ran our half marathon and she's
well,
run with our group.
yes, and that was
Yeah.
what my question was going to be about, actually, the half marathon. So I did a half marathon just over a year ago, and I didn't do much training. I was really badly prepared. It was all my fault. But when I did try and start training in the run up to the event, I got shin splints. So in order to just try and get some base level of fitness so that I could survive the run, I was just going on the exercise bike just to get a little bit of cardio because that didn't seem to exacerbate the shin splints. Are there any other kind of good forms of exercise that you would recommend if people are suffering from shin splints that they can do just to try and keep that fitness up?
Yeah, one really underrated thing is actually walking and hiking. A lot of people never like, they're like, walking doesn't count, but it totally counts. Walking makes me very tired personally sometimes when I walk a lot. But walking actually can help a lot because that's kind of one of the most similar things that we can get to running, where we still have impact on the body, but it's pretty low. The movement patterns are somewhat similar, and that can actually really help you increase your strength of your calves specifically. So shin splints often there's a lot of things that cause shin splints, but kind of one of the main things that we see is weak calves. So it might be something to look into if you need to work on calf strength a little bit. But actually,
Okay.
walking and hiking can be a really, really good way to build that up in a way that's low impact, that just feels good and is close to running. And what's fun about walking too is with time, when you do it a lot, you can actually start to build in like very little amounts of running into it too. So sometimes when I have an athlete, like I had an athlete recently who came to me and they had an injury prior to working with me. Um, so we started working together in like her return to run process, which is always very fun. Just kind of coming back to running after injury is really cool. And actually, what I had her do is just like I programmed a 45-minute walk and said, if you feel good, run for 30 seconds 3 times in this. And that's all I want you to do, but see how it feels. So that's literally how we introduced running back is like just 30 seconds at a time. Because I think I do this too with myself when I'm coming back from something. Like I really want to dive back into running a lot when I start running. But you can actually just do it in really small amounts. So walking is a really nice way to kind of bridge that. And then you can incorporate like little teeny bits of running until you can like work your way fully up to. But I would say calf strength, especially to check out. And then walking is very, very underrated too.
Okay. And I tend to have quite tight calves. Is that
Hmm.
probably an
Yeah.
indicator that the calves, they're not just tight, they're weak as well?
Yes, so that goes for anything in the body. If you have tightness, that probably indicates weakness somewhere. So that would be calves are a perfect example. Tight calves often mean that we need to work out that tightness. So foam rolling is actually really, really helpful and important. And Melissa knows that I talk about foam rolling like every single day to every athlete that I work with. It's very, very important. It can help kind of work out some of that tightness. But if you constantly have reoccurring tightness in an area, that actually often means weakness in an area. So working on calf strength will actually help reduce that tightness too with time, which is always nice.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Griffey, I see you have a question.
Mhm.
You
Open up. Oh. Okay, so you did track and field, right?
Yes, I did. In high school and college, I did work for the club team too.
So what are some good workouts for the 1600?
Yeah, I love this. I actually have an athlete training for the mile right now. So I'm very jazzed about this. So with the mile or the 1600 in particular, you want a lot of time at running very fast at mile pace, which like in marathon training, we actually sometimes train less for marathon pace than we would for something like the mile. So running at mile pace with lots of rest in between. So what that might look like is I love 200s and 400s for athletes who are running on the track. So doing lots and lots of 200s. So what that sometimes looks like is if you're on the track running 200 fast at mile pace and then running the other 200 really, really slow, and then running 200 fast and then really, really slow. I don't want to give you a specific number of reps because I don't know your training specifically, but I would say like at least 10 to 12 reps of that, where you're running 10 laps total, 200 fast, 200 slow. 10 times is kind of a nice one. Also, 400s are great. So what you might do is 400 fast at mile pace, and then maybe do like a little jog around for maybe 200, and then do another 400. And so you can do that like, I don't know, maybe 4 to 6 times. So doing a lot of fast reps, but making sure you're doing a lot of recovery between. It's almost like equal recovery. So if you're doing 200 fast, 200 slow, 200 fast, 200 slow, it's a little bit different. Whereas like if you're training for like a half marathon or a full marathon, you're doing shorter recoveries. So if you're doing like half marathon mile repeats, you're running those reps slower than you would for the mile, but you might only have a minute or two of recovery in between. But for the 1600, you want to have a lot of time at 1600 pace too. Track workouts are fun. I like those a lot.
I have
1 mile.
question.
See, it's so scary.
It's a
I have
lot.
a
It's very
question.
quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about posture. I'm more of a walkers breaking into running, and I watch beautiful runners run, and they look like they're gliding. And then people take a video of me doing the 5K, and I'm flailing, my arms all over, I make giant steps. I know the theory, but do I record myself? How do I improve how I start running?
Yeah, this is a good question. I do actually think recording yourself once in a while can help. You don't need to do every single run, but I would say like if you're working on your form, maybe once a month, just getting a little video of yourself running can sometimes be helpful. But some cues that we always like to come back to with running are being upright. So we don't want to like have you hunched over or anything like that. So thinking like good posture, your shoulders are back. And we don't want to really overthink too much. So a lot of people talk about cadence a lot. So that's how many steps you take per minute. Cadence, I will tell you, does not like there's not a specific number that's perfect for everybody. We want to think quick feet though, so taking shorter, smaller steps and taking faster steps, and trying not to make really, really big steps because the problem with that is when you start taking really big steps, you overstride. Heel striking is not a bad thing, like a lot of people will tell you, or maybe runners would tell you. Heel striking is not necessarily a bad thing, but what's wrong with heel striking is that it's often associated with overstriding. So if you're taking too big of steps, then that's when a heel strike becomes more apparent. So just taking shorter, quick steps, trying to keep your foot to land underneath your body, um, staying upright, leaning forward from your ankles and not from your hips. So we don't want you to like be hunched over because you're bending at your butt. We want your forward lean to kind of come from your ankles. So if you were to like stop running, you would almost like fall over if you weren't moving forward because we want gravity to do the work for you. Like it's nice when we don't have there's less work for us to do. So lean forward. And a way that I like to kind of practice that is to like go up against a wall and lean forward from your ankles so you can catch yourself. So you can kind of see like what does it look like when my body's straight but leaning forward because a lot of people will bend from their hips and like kind of stick their butt out. And we don't want that. We love your butt, but we don't need to stick it out while you're running. So leaning forward. And then as for arms, that's another good one. We don't want your arms kind of going out while we're running because that's actually energy loss. It takes energy to move our arms. And we want all of our energy to go towards our legs because they need it. So kind of keeping your arms within close to your body and keeping it If you were to like kind of ball your fist, actually, that's another question I get a lot too, is what should I do with my hands? You don't need to overthink it, but I was told actually once when I was young, and this is one that I think about all the time, is almost like you're holding a potato chip in between your thumb and your fingers. So that's just kind of a light, loose grasp. You don't want to break your potato chip. So just kind of keeping it nice and loose. So kind of a very light fist like this. Or if you're holding like a grape, you don't want to crush your grape. So keeping it nice and loose. And then keep your arms close to you and then kind of moving back and forth like this. I know you can't really see me super well. I'll give this, I know there is a child here, but kind of a cue that I've always really liked is nips to hips. So your nipples, you want your hands to be close to your body like that, and then to your hips. Is kind of a nice, like keeping your bodies close to you. Nips to hips is kind of describing like where your hands fall between your chest to your hips and just kind of keeping it within. Because if you're starting to like flail your arms out this way or anything like that, again, we're starting to lose energy and we're a little bit less efficient too. So nips to hips is a nice kind of cue that I like to use. Um, and then just remembering to kind of keep the energy controlled with your arms. You don't want your arms doing a lot of work. They do the work for us when we're like running uphill. You can use your arms to drag yourself forward, but we kind of want to keep them close to the body otherwise. And then that forward lean and quick steps are kind of our big cues that we want to remember for running too.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? I see
Well, we
Nora
had, like-
joining us from Dallas.
Oh,
Hi, Nora.
we had a couple questions that were not answered. Like there's this
Yeah.
one from Anthony. How many miles should we expect out of our running shoes? Also, how do we find the right shoes? Huh? LOL.
Yes.
You mean you don't
Oh my
find your
gosh.
shoes on marshalls.com like me?
Yeah, go to Marshall's first. Um, this is a really good question, and running shoes are so hard, I will say. It just takes time to find the right shoe for you. And actually, what I usually recommend athletes do is to go to a running store in person, at least for your first pair, because the people who work there are very, very knowledgeable in just shoes that work for different people. So you can actually try on a bunch of different shoes. The last time I went to the running store, I said, please give me every trail shoe you have and just let me try on them in my size. And the person was like, okay. So they brought me literally like 10 boxes of shoes out, and I felt very annoying, but it was fun because I got to try on all these different types. And I knew like this shoe definitely doesn't work for me, and this shoe does. So you can try them on and make sure you run around on them a little bit too. So most running stores will have like a treadmill you can either run on, or they'll let you run around the block. So try them out, and running shoes should feel pretty good, like right from the start. You shouldn't really have to break them in. They should feel nice and cushy and good. What you probably want is a daily trainer just for most of your training. You can get like a fun, fast racing shoe too. That's always fun and a good investment as well. But if you're just looking for a nice shoe to run in consistently, you want to ask for a daily trainer. The person will know exactly what you're talking about if you ask for a daily trainer, and then just try on anything and everything. Cushy shoes are often better, especially if you're starting to increase your mileage. We want a little cushion to absorb that impact from your body. And then as for miles, this also depends on your shoe. Unfortunately, I feel like I used to be able to give like you can run like 300 to 400 miles in most shoes and feel pretty good. But shoes are all like very different now. Some shoes have shorter lifespans. Some have longer, like I've had a couple pairs of shoes and been able to run like 500 to 600 miles in, but I've also had some shoes that I like get like maybe 100 miles out of, and I'm like, these already don't feel good. So the range is kind of big. I'd say on average, most shoes should last you about 300 miles. But that also depends a lot on like what kind of miles you're running. Like, are you running a lot of speed workouts in them? Are you running on the trails? The trails tend to be a little bit harder on shoes than the roads are sometimes, just because of all the moving and the rocks and things. Also can contribute of like a person's body, like the impact from our bodies on different shoes can make them last in different ways. But a sign that your shoes are probably need to be replaced are they feel flat, so they just don't give you that pop and they don't feel good anymore. or if you're starting to experience like some lower leg aches and pains, so like ankle pain, shin pain, calf pain, sometimes even knee problems can be an indicator that it might be time to switch your shoes too. So once you start to lose that pop, they just don't feel good or cushy anymore. Or if you start to feel some aches and pains in your lower legs, are probably a good sign that you need to replace them too. That's a good question.
And then there was one more question from Celise. How do you advise handling mental fatigue and negative self-talk on a long
Yeah.
effort?
This is a great question. This is one that we're probably all constantly battling. And first, I want to say, like, very, very normal to experience negative self-talk. I think just like letting those thoughts kind of come, this is kind of where like meditation and that sort of stuff might come in, but you don't need to necessarily do that. But where you kind of let the thoughts like exist and be like, oh, I feel really bad and like I'm so slow. And just being like, okay, that was a thought. We don't need to feed into that anymore. And then just like kind of letting that thought kind of flow away and kind of leaning into the things that do feel, I don't know if I want to say do feel good because there are certainly runs that like sometimes nothing feels good and that happens too. But just like accepting the thought and just being like, okay, that happened. It's okay. And then leaning into something else. And what that something else might look like varies for a lot of athletes too. So for me, I like to put on like some good music. So whether that's like some hardcore rap, I might listen to that and that makes me feel a little bit better sometimes. Or listen to a fun podcast that like makes me laugh. I think also like talking with people. I know we don't always do these runs with people, but if you do have people near you, just like being like, oh, I don't feel good and the person running with you might be like, yeah, me either. And then you can kind of just like exist in the suck together a little bit sometimes can be nice. We've all been there before, that's for sure. But just kind of like finding something to, I don't want to say distract you, but just like, just, being like, this happens, this is normal. This isn't just because I suck at running and because I'm not good at running. It's just because that is totally normal because running is hard too. So just remembering that like these things do happen and these thoughts are totally normal, but then finding your way around it. Some other things that I like to do, this is a little bit more like where like meditation and mind body practice stuff comes in, but doing like a body scan. So your legs might hurt really, really badly. But I bet you could find something, one thing on your body that doesn't hurt. So sometimes it's literally like, my ears don't hurt. And that's like the best that I'm gonna get today. Like my ears feel fine. But sometimes if you like be like, okay, the top of my head feels fine. My nose feels good. My ears feel good. My neck feels fine. My shoulders are a little sore, but they're fine. My biceps are really, really sore for some reason. My elbows feel good. And if you can kind of like, first off, like make some fun with it, I think that's always good. Make yourself laugh a little bit, but then also like lean into things like there are some things that don't hurt. Because I bet there are some things in your process that don't hurt. I hope if everything hurts, then that's maybe something that we need to figure out. But just like kind of finding something that like, okay, my legs feel really, really, really bad, or maybe like I'm working really hard right now, like this is hard. But again, like my ears feel fine. So that's at least something that I got going for me. It can also make you laugh, which is good. But just kind of like doing a little scan of the things that don't feel good and the things that do. And I think that can both help you be connected on your runs, just being connected with your body, but also reminding you that like not everything is bad either, which is always important. Well, any last minute questions? I know we went a little over, but I don't mind.
I think it'd be really great if you could share your like contact info if
Oh,
anybody
yeah.
did want to contact you. After all, you are somebody might be in the market for a coach.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Good. Yes, I don't like talking about myself, but yeah. So my contact information. Actually, my website is usually the easiest thing to go up to. It's smilesandmilescoaching.com. I can type it in the chat here in a second. My email is just smilesandmilescoaching@gmail.com, which I'll also type in there. And then I'm also on Instagram if you want to follow each other. I love seeing people's Instagrams. So it's it's Jess Schnier Runs. I'll also type that in there. And then, yeah, so I offer one-on-one coaching. So that's more kind of like the really, really high touch stuff. But I also just offer consultation calls too. So if you're like, I just want to talk about running, I'm happy to do that too, because I love talking about running. And it's one of the reasons that I work as as a running coach is just because it's fun to chat about people and their goals and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'll type on all of my contact information in there, and yeah, hope to hear from some of you guys too.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
so
coming
very
and doing
much.
this talk for us. It was so great, and we had a lot of folks turn out. I love that we had so many questions.
Yeah, so many good questions too. You guys got me working hard on this one too, which is good for me.
And we did record it for those few who said that they had a conflict but wanted to learn as well.
There we go. I just put in all
Yeah.
that too. Yeah. If anybody has any other questions too, feel free to send me an email. You don't have to like work with me to talk with me. I'm always happy to answer questions. If anything comes up after this too, just ping me an email or message on Instagram too, and I'm happy to answer those too.
Awesome. And we'll share your contact with our team materials to everybody in our newsletter.
Sweet. Thanks so much. It was so nice to get to chat with you all. Thanks for all the great questions and for chatting for a while too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.